Hello, everyone. Today we're going to mix things up a little bit. I'm going to interview Mitra. And I was thinking to myself that there's so much I know about Mitra, and yet there's so much I don't know about what has shaped her and into the woman who she is and the wisdom that has come from those experiences in her life. And we went a little bit into Mitra's past in our first episode on this podcast. And today we're going to go deeper. And Mitra, I'm particularly interested in three areas of your life: your spirituality, your motherhood, being a mother, and partnership, and particularly your most recent partnership with Henry. So, the first question I have for you is around your spirituality. And I'm curious to know, just broadly right now, if you can lay out the evolution of your spiritual journey, where it started and where you are now. The if you were to break it up into the key kind of themes or phases, how would you do that? How would you describe it?
I haven't moved an inch.
Mm.
It's just evolving. I think the answer is it's evolving. The main thing was that much earlier in my life, really earlier on in my life, I realized that I'm very interested in a deeper version of things. I think that's what was really the beginning of so-called a spiritual journey. I think we are all on a spiritual journey. Some of us pay more attention to it than others, but it started and continues based on curiosity. I'm extremely curious person, but not curious about the outer world, like as you have noticed, and people who know me know. I am extremely inconsistent with the dates and places and people, or forget things, but I am very consistent with the essence of things and the substance of things. So to answer your question, it started with curiosity. It continues with curiosity, and it's in layers. I mean, the more layers I open up, more layers open up. So I think consciousness is always evolving. So my journey would always be evolving around that evolution and progress.
From what I know about you is that your curiosity started at a very young age. I mean, when you were 8 years old, you were asking deep questions about the meaning of life, and you were, by the time you were 11, you were thinking about death and what death is and what the meaning of death is.
Yes, it was
Can
much
you
earlier on.
can you paint a picture of what that phase of your life was like, and your childhood to teenage period, what that phase was like in terms of your spirituality?
The first thing I remember, Ben, about sort of, if you want to label it as a spiritual experience, was that I remember that I used to walk to school. And I remember the conversation I had with my grandmother that I preferred to walk alone, to a degree that they got suspicious of, why do I want to walk alone? And the reason I wanted to do that I was talking to God. And God, I don't even know to this day what I mean by that, but I was talking to um, a source, if you
Mm.
like, a center of reference that was a point of reference for me. And when I said that to my grandmother, she asked the first question she asked, and she said, "Does he talk back to you?" Because I think she was worried that I have mental problem.
Yeah.
And I said, "Well, not in that way, not in words, but I feel things." She said, "Oh, good," that she settled down. And then the next thing I remember, funny, both of them with my grandmother, that I remember that it was a thunderstorm. And I remember the home that we were in. So I must have been kindergarten age. And I remember I had this desire to go out and above on the roof. And I don't know where I got that from, that I had a feeling that some meeting will take place with what I called God, and I still do. But it has to be under like a very extreme weather condition. So I remember that I went there and I was waiting and I closed the door to the roof and I was sitting there and it was raining. And I think my grandmother looked for me everywhere and they couldn't find me. So she came to the roof and she found me. And I was just so upset because I thought if she's there, God won't come.
Mm.
And so just imagine my poor grandmother. She says, "Come down. What are you doing in the rain?" I said, "I'll go. You go. I come down." And she says, "No, come down now. You're going to catch a cold." I said, "No, please go. If you stay, he won't come." And then she really got concerned. She said, "He won't come? Who won't come?" I said, anyway, it was a very difficult conversation. And at last I had to disclose to her and I said, "Grandma, I'm waiting for God. And if
Mm.
you stay, I know he won't come. He only is
Uh,
coming to meet with me." And then I started crying because I thought, oh, my secret is out. And then they're going to either come and get involved in this relationship or they're
mm.
going to think I'm crazy. I was old enough to know that this is not normal.
Wow.
And so these are the things I remember, that these are like much, much earlier, before I was 8. This is before I went to grade 1. And yeah, that relationship, something must have been there right from the beginning.
So you were clearly different. The way you looked at the world, the way you perceived the world was different from kids your age. And I'm curious, how did that impact you emotionally? Did you ever feel sad that you couldn't relate to other people, or that you felt like you should be somewhere else and not here in this world? I mean, how has that impacted you emotionally, you know being on that wavelength?
Very interesting question, because you put two words together and you said isolated and sad. I felt very isolated and I knew it was like there was two of me. I knew that I'm not normal in this life. I knew that. But that lack of normalcy, I think it was it was a good secret. It wasn't a bad secret. It wasn't something that felt. I'm only going with the memory as my feelings. I knew like I have something, I have access to a world that most people don't. And I just saw that as a different way of being, but I was never ever sad about this. In fact, when I refer to it now, and I feel like, how did I feel when I was like, this happened and that happened? And I realized that it's almost like I have a mission to be here. I knew that I'm here and it's okay
Mm,
that I'm not like other people. And I'm not making it a grand mission. I don't get me wrong. I don't think I have like that kind of mission, but it felt like that as a child. So I accepted my differentness. And in fact, I valued it a lot. I spent a lot of time just contemplation,
mm,
and contemplating. And and I knew where I knew it from, beside, of course, these experiences, was that I would listen to my friends and like people my age, and I would think why these things are so important to them. I
mm,
could never relate to what was important to people. I still can't.
mm,
Like they really struggled over things that I thought like, this is not a problem, but I could never say it because they were suffering. And you
mm.
can't, like, if I'm crying, you can't just say, Mitra, that's not important. But
Yeah,
I was always puzzled
yeah.
by what was important to them, and hence concluded that I must be very different than not just some, but all people around me.
Mm, wow. So this deepened, and then you in your teenage years, you went deep into spiritual studies, right? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes. And it was before I even was a teenager. I remember I had a neighbor, which I have talked about, Mr. Purjahani. He didn't have any children. He couldn't have any children, but he raised two people who were, fatherless, for lack of a better word. And one of them was my best friend. This was Mr. Purjahani's step grandson. And we were very close and he was very deep. I could relate to him. And we talked about science. We talked about wisdom, and he had, brain tumor and he died, like in front of me, died gradually. And then in front of me died. And that took me to a place of quite of depth about what is death. And I remember having conversation with Mr. Pourjahani, who was in grief and mourning the child that he raised, but together and through sometimes Rumi and Rumi's philosophy, not just poetry, we uncovered things that I now am like really impressed. I didn't know that was that deep. I thought it's just a conversation. But now when I refer back to it, that took me, now I'm like 11, 12, to a place of complete view of what
Mm.
life is. Because when you understand death, when you figure out death in any ways, either complete or not complete, that really says a lot about life.
Yeah.
So yes, and then I got into deep philosophy reading. I was reading, even though reading is very difficult for me. I have dyslexia and I don't understand things, but I was deep into philosophy and philosophical books and philosophical systems from Greek philosophy to um, Persian philosophy to even more recent philosophy, Nietzsche and Kafka and Jean-Paul Sartre. And like, I just went to a different world of just studying, just reading and observing it and seeing what that does for me.
Was there a particular philosophy or a book or teaching that had an impact on you during that time, a particular impact?
Yes, I was very interested in the relationship between numbers and philosophy. So Pythagoras, yes, and as I said, a lot of, and then also I realized that a lot of it came from my own culture, Razi and Ibn Sina, and there were a lot of philosophical connection between numbers and the philosophy of life, and that was a world that opened up. So that discovery, the relationship between life, philosophy, and numbers opened a completely different door for me. So one was death, two was philosophy and numbers, and then it was like all reading and adding to
Tell me
what I
more
knew.
about that. What did it help you remember? Because what I see in your journey is it's a process of you remembering, right? You had, as a child, you had this connection to God. You didn't fully understand it. Your relationship with Pur, Mr. Pujahani provided more remembering for you, more clarity for you. And then this phase in as a teenager, reading these materials and philosophy and numbers continued to remove this veil or create more clarity for you. So the numbers and the philosophy, how did that what kind of clarity did that give you in your journey?
That there, first of all, isn't it like that for everyone that we are
Of course.
remembering?
Yeah,
Yeah,
of course. Yeah.
we're all
And
remembering.
you just happen to remember a lot at the beginning of your life.
Yes, I
So,
think it's the passion of wanting to remember
yeah.
that allows people and allowed me. But okay, when I understood numbers, and remember, I have dyslexia and I don't understand anything, and that was probably a gift that I didn't know I had. When people talked about normal things, like I don't even comprehend what people are saying. Instructions is the worst thing for me. I remember,
I know that
honestly,
from
this is
firsthand
like,
experience.
I mean, I was sitting in the class. I never forget. Like I'm in grade two. I'm like a top student. And then the teacher says, go and do blah, 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 blah. And everybody's doing it. And I'm thinking, what are we supposed to do? Everybody looks at me, what she said. I said, like, what did she say? And nobody could believe that I don't understand, yet I'm a good student. I could
Mm,
not follow. And it formed my character. So I
mm,
was famous at home for being stubborn. Okay.
mm,
Just guess where that came from. You tell me, Mitra, pick this up, put it there, and then come back here. I don't understand what you're saying. And you
mm,
repeat
mhm,
that 20 times and you figure out that Mitra must be stubborn. She doesn't want to listen to anyone. But
interesting.
I'm standing there thinking, Ben, what should I do? Could you please repeat? I don't know what you're saying. And nobody is
Uh-huh.
believing me because I'm a good student. I sound like I have some kind of intelligence. So nobody believes. This is very important. I'm saying this that I hope somebody listens to this and someone has, I know for sure my friend, and discovers this in their own self or in their children or in their loved ones. Now, let me go back to remembering. The process of remembering and unveiling the numbers gave me hope that there is a structure that I can
Ah,
eventually figure out,
interesting.
because I couldn't figure out anything in this world of I call it the square word, because it's based on like four things. Everything has a structure of four. And I thought, like, I'm really lost in this world. But when I discovered numbers, I thought, okay, through numbers, maybe I can live in this world in some kind of connection and understanding.
Interesting. Yeah, it was helping you make sense of this
Yes,
world.
exactly.
And how though? How do numbers help you do that?
So funny, we were talking about to a client. He said to me, number seven keeps coming to me. And he wanted to go. I said, no, that's a good place to start. He said, what? It's just a number. I know it's probably a good number. I said, no, it's not good or bad. Seven, in the moment, I discovered. I said three and four. He said, okay. I said, three is the symbol of the invisible world, the trinity of things.
Mm,
Like
mm-hmm,
look at religions or look at philosophy. He said, okay. I said, and four is the symbol of this world, the physical material world. He said, okay. I said, the question is your three sitting on top and informing your four, or is it the
mm,
other way around? Your four
interesting.
informing your three. And
Interesting.
then he just is like in a very deep place. He said, funny you said that. And then we go into conversation. And I realized that that's exactly the question he's contemplating in this
Mm.
moment.
Yeah, it's so interesting because I perceive you as someone who is very right brain, so more intuitive, more you feel your way into things. You don't follow instructions, right? Yet numbers are, to me, I perceive them as more of a left brain thing, right? For most people, right? It is a left brain thing, and and perhaps it is that for you too, but it's in a language that resonates with you because there's two layers to numbers. There's the numbers that we understand and the way we use them in day-to-day life, but then there's this deeper symbolic meaning. There's these energies that these numbers carry as well that you are relating to. Am I
Exactly.
understanding this right?
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
numbers hold the truth. That's the difference between instruction of how to put things together from IKEA and numbers, because numbers hold the truth with a sense of structure. And
Yeah.
that sort of brought these two worlds for me together and allowed me to understand the world in a way. And it's not like I can interpret numbers, but I understand things through numbers. And that's what's, it's just for me. I mean, sometimes I can articulate it and normal people can understand it. And sometimes I can only share what it means to me. And maybe that helps someone. But other than that, it's a very, very private way of understanding numbers. And that is fascinating to me.
Yeah, yeah, it is, and I've went through a period of fascination with that, and fascination with how actually everything in the universe has mathematics correlated with it. There's this field of study called cosmometry, and it's understanding the mathematical and harmonic nature of everything in existence, everything
Yes.
from an atom all the way up to the planets. So it is super fascinating. And right now, well, for someone who's interested in exploring that and understanding numbers from the lens through which you're talking about it, how would you direct them? Where would you guide them?
I have no guidance. Allow, 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 allow the remembrance to come, because when the mind knows, it stops us from remembering. So sell your intelligence and purchase some bewilderment, as Rumi says.
Yeah. You've gone deep in your teenage years, and then you decide you go to college, and then you decide to go to the United States. Big culture shock. And you go to the United States to study there. Your intention was to do a 4-year program in Texas, of all places, right? Talk about culture shock. Nothing wrong with Texas, but a very stark contrast with the Persian Iranian culture. And you spend about a year and a half there. How was your spiritual journey, your relationship with spirit impacted during that period of time? What was it? Or was it a period of you just integrating and seeing a different part of the world and understanding people from a different lens?
Yes, that and an extreme shock. I was, and it was a gift. It was a great gift. I had many friends, none of them from my background, but many of them from the same tribe, as I call it, because we all come from the same tribe. I got to know my good friend who was my roommate, uh, Nora Lisa. We became very good friends. I understood the world, outer world, in a different sense, which was very interesting. That was the other gift that came from that I got really interested in Indigenous culture and spirituality. Um,
Interesting. I
yes,
didn't know that
that's
about you.
yes, that was the first time that I actually understood. I remember I got to read the first book that I read in English was Carlos Castaneda book,
Hmm.
who was talking about that kind of thing. And
Yeah.
I had a friend in Texas that was from indigenous community, and she connected me with her, I think was uncle, who was the chief.
Mm,
And I begged her to take me to the chief, to her uncle, and introduce me
mm.
to the tribe, for lack of a better word. And she did. So that became another teacher for me, that the chief, that was very, very interesting to me. And ah, I- he took me to a place that I had not been before.
What did this teacher teach you or help you remember, I should say, that you hadn't remembered before then?
One thing out of all the conversation, and I even stayed with them for a while, the one thing that really has helped me today is take it to the higher grounds. I
Mm,
remember
I
that's what
remember
he
that.
said.
Yep,
That's
you've
what he
shared that.
taught me. That's
Yep.
what he said, whenever you can't find a solution, it's because you're looking at it. And that gave me a tool that I now share with other people, which is called zooming in, zooming out. You zoom in to see the problem, but until you zoom out, you will not see the solution.
Mm,
So he took it to the higher grounds, and you know the story, and I tell the short story version for those of you who haven't heard this or interview friends, that one day that I was there, I realized that my teacher is missing, and I looked for him and I said, "Where is he?" They said, "Oh, he's gone to the higher grounds." And I said, "Where's the higher grounds?" I thought it was like one of the name of a place. "When
mhm.
is he coming back?" Everyone said, "We don't know." They said, "Like, what do you mean? Where? How he can't just disappear? I'm here for a few days." Anyways, the short story is that when there is a collective puzzle to be solved, as he called it, he goes away. They pack up food for him. He goes away and sits on top of a mountain, literally the
Mm,
higher grounds, but not a particular place. And this is the version I remember. And then, and then when he's in that solitude and contemplation, he remembers the answer. And when he does, he comes back. And then one day I wake up and he's there. Taking it to the higher grounds was the
taking it
lesson.
to the higher ground. He had an influence on you. He helped broaden your perspective, your connection to nature, your connection to finding clarity in the three-dimensional world.
Yes.
Yeah, when we're faced
Yes.
with three-dimensional challenges,
Yes.
getting clarity. So during this time, it's the first time you've left Iran, which you have a very deep connection to. Were you homesick during this time? Did you go through any significant inner challenges as you were absorbing this culture shock? How was that for you?
Very
Or were you
strong.
just were you just in a state of curiosity and joy? during that
Yeah.
time?
I wish I could say yes to that, but no. It was the duality in me. In one side of me, I was just thriving in new environment, new philosophies, new just talking to people and understanding, wow, because comparing to where I had come from, this was a very culturally very individualistic culture. Not good or bad, but just very different. And it was fascinating to me how people looked at things, on their own, and
Mm,
how mechanical some things were. I remember the first time I went to my friend's home, one of my friend's home in Houston, Texas, and she took me to their kitchen, and I looked at their kitchen. The kitchen was so large and so clean. There was no sign of anything. And I looked around and there were a lot of machines there. Don't forget, this is 1977.
mhm,
And I said, "What are these?" She said, "Oh, this is a ice maker." I said, "Okay, what is this?" She said, "This is a ice cream maker." I
mm,
said, "What is that?" She said, "It's a bread maker." And then, of course, a lot of makers, they had a like huge home and they were very wealthy. And I said, "You have a lot of makers, but you don't have any food."
mm.
She laughed and we both laughed. I said, "I go to kitchen in my home and we have no makers, but it's always this smell of food and scents and spices coming out of." But it was just fascinating. I was fascinated. But, and two realities always can um, be true at the same time.
Mhm,
I was deeply suffering because I was missing a lot of
mm,
things, but
mhm,
also because I was deeply responsible, even though I was the youngest child. My father had passed away. My sister was married. My brother was in US. And I
mm,
was feeling very responsible for my mother and my grandmother
mm,
that I
mhm.
had left behind
Yep.
and had become basically like the father of the family when everybody left, like as a child. And so I went back.
Okay, so you go back to Iran, but that's short-lived because the revolution happens a year later. And during that window of time, you met your first husband, which is really interesting to me because you were pretty young. You were about 22 years old when that happened. I perceive you up until this, even now, up until this point in your life, as someone who's very independent, who's very curious, wants to be free and explore life. And I wouldn't imagine someone like that would marry that early. So help us understand what were the events that led to that? Why did you decide to marry at that time? Did you not even think about it much? You were just going with the flow. So help us understand.
Yes, marriage was very far from my consciousness at that time, but I have to say the events that were happening, it's very informing. The environment was very charged. I went back to Iran and things were happening and people were on streets and a lot of sense of unity was happening, either for or against. And I think that was one of the reasons that I felt close to my friend then, but then later on my husband. And I don't like that word husband. I always use it in a different way because I feel like it comes from husbandry, and
Mm,
I don't like that word. But
yeah.
I'm just saying it for my first life partner. And what happened was that I think that common tension that existed then brought us together. And he's a very charitable person. His character was very fascinating. He was like working with children in orphanages. He
Mm,
had written a book in his 20s that was being taught at university. So he was intelligent. He was deep. He was kind. So he wasn't a normal man. He was a very interesting person.
mm,
And before him, I also had a very interesting relationship with a man who was much older than me. Again,
mm,
very deep into, working with numbers and philosophy. And I remember we
mm,
used to talk till midnight about these things. So he was very interesting, but I think the environment and the events that were happening were one of the strongest reasons that I can now, when I look back, that
mm,
brought us together and allowed me to say yes when he was much warmer towards me than I was towards him romantically. And I thought, yes would be a right answer at that time.
Mm. And then shortly after, you guys have to leave Iran.
Yes, yes, on foot.
You on foot. You go to Paris for a little bit. Paris is a period of time where you're grieving and you're processing, you know, leaving Iran and losing your home. I know this was a time where you spent a lot of time in the museums with art, and you would contemplate in front of art. Um, and that period in Paris was short lived. You guys then move to Australia. You decided to move your life there and to settle down in Australia. At any point in the first few years of your first marriage, did you feel regret or feel like, I don't know if this is right for me, or any of that? What were the challenges that you were faced with in the first few years, if any? Or were you just enjoying it at that time as well?
What we shared was the sense of survival. Just think
Hmm.
about two young people left, and we went to Australia really independently. There was no one there. We knew no one there. It was very far from our experience and from our location geographically. And I think the years that we were building a life, like literally, like constructing a life, was the years that we were very much a team. And once the life was fine and stable, that's when I think I realized that I was doing that so that I can get to my inner world. I
Mm,
wasn't doing that so I can continue doing that.
interesting, interesting.
It's
Okay.
a
Yeah.
fascinating thing. So it's like you and I are making a home and building a home, and we build it, but I'm building it so that we can go and study. But you're building it so that we can like continue building another home and another home and another home. And I'm thinking, I think there is something that is not resonating anymore. And
Mm.
that became very evident when few years went by, and then I decided this is going to really affect my inner journey. And that's when I decided that this is not going to be something that I can really continue this marriage and this relationship.
But that took 11 years. So,
That
and
took
in
11
those,
years.
that took 11 years. And in those 11 years, you also became a mother. You had your first child when you were about 24, and then you had your second child a few years after that. It's interesting because it sounds like this was a period where you were dealing with inner conflict, a lot of inner conflict, right? Even the decision to be a mother, you're in a marriage, and then even the decision to be a mother now is, in the eyes of most people, taking you away from your spirituality, although it can be seen as very deeply spiritual experience as well. So what was going through your mind at this time, deciding to stay in the marriage and deciding to be a mother? Help us understand what was going through your mind. How did you reason through that? How did you just decide to continue versus leaving sooner versus choosing not to be a mother?
Part of it is cultural. I mean, I had not heard of divorce
Mm,
anywhere in radius close to me. So it had a lot of taboo, and I was influenced by that, especially by my
mm,
mother.
yeah,
So that
yeah.
was not a thing. I felt like that's a thing we don't do, and I had
You don't
bought
even
into that.
consider it.
It
Yeah,
wasn't in my consciousness. It
yeah.
wasn't an option, and even motherhood. And I know this is not the thing that mothers are supposed to say. I never considered being a mother. It wasn't like I know a lot of women, like that's what they think and they love to do it and it's beautiful. I never had that. And when we talked about it and I felt pregnant, then it was a different, I realized this is really, really rich. When I held my first child in my hand, in Perth, Australia. They were both born there. I realized, wow, I'm stepping into a world that I thought belonged to this world, that it was from the material world, but it
Mm,
really was not. It really was not. And I have to say, if you asked me, teachers, if there are any teachers in my lifetime, and it's not a romantic thing that I'm saying to put it on a card for their birthday. If there are teachers that I need to choose in my life that truly influenced me, it would be my children. Because once, and I'm a very responsible person, because once they step into this world, once they chose me as their mother and I chose them as my children, we were intertwined and will be until I leave at least this body.
Yeah.
And that became a very important thing. So trying to hold it together was the reason for 11 years, because it wasn't in my consciousness. But few events happened that showed me through what reactions I was seeing that this is not sustainable. This is just
Mm.
not going to work.
Okay, I am curious to hear about that, but first, I'm curious to hear more about how motherhood contributed to your remembering. We're talking about this theme of remembering who you are, where you came from, the meaning of this life for you. Can you shine the light on that? On what did your children and being a mother help you remember?
The journey of motherhood to me was exactly like journey of human beings. Like I write in my book about this journey that we were one and then we separated. And then because of that separation, we started suffering because
Mm,
we forgot that we were one and the creation. So there are three things that are sign of being from another world. One is unity, two is creation, and three is joy. And the unity, when that turns into separation, the joy and creation are influenced. So the foundation of us going back home, sort of speak, is that unity. And when I held this child that literally came out of me in my hand, I started remembering the unity that I had with God.
wow. Yep. I'm
Of
feeling that
course,
as
I'm
you.
giving words to it now, referring back. Believe me, I don't want to sound like in the middle of pain and my birth was natural pain as I'm bleeding and holding a child. That's not what I thought. But some electricity went through my body and said, this needs, contemplation. This is not just, oh, that's great. I gave birth. Isn't that wonderful? Somebody to carry my name, which I never understand, but whatever. But it wasn't that part that stayed with me. The part that stayed with me was like, wow, this is something else.
Wow, wow. So you experienced, I mean, talk about duality, right? The unity coming from oneness. She was birthed inside of you, uh, and was part of you, and then separate. And so you experienced the duality, the pain of separation
Yes.
through that. So what were your biggest challenges as a mother?
The biggest challenge as a mother for me was to allow survivalist aspect of our life. And there were a lot of that because, I became a single mother and had to work and had to do a lot of stuff to make sure that that part doesn't ruin the the deeper and inner part of the journey. That was very difficult because the survival aspect of my life, it was extreme. It was almost like I was testing myself saying, can you take this too and see how far you can take it? It was like when I say to people I've experienced that and experienced that, it really sounds like I'm pretending that I've experienced a lot of things. And I try to actually hold back sometimes. But if I tell you the things that I have experienced, the pain that I have experienced in this lifetime, it doesn't match the happy face that I have.
Mm.
And it's not because I'm pretending, it's because I'm understanding better
Hmm.
and better as I live
Yeah.
here on this planet.
Yeah. I mean, we hear from, all the wisdom traditions and the wise sages that, our pain is all opportunity for us to experience our true nature, which is joy. And perhaps, the more pain sometimes we go through, the contrast is higher. So when we're able to understand better, we get to experience lots and lots of joy, which so it actually makes a lot of sense. So, for some context for our audience, Mitra, you were the first several years of being a mother, you were in Australia, you were still married, and then at one point you made the decision to separate from your husband and move to a brand new country all on your own with your kids as a single mother, uh, to Canada. Before that time, were there any particular challenges that you were faced with as a mother, and any surprises that you had, anything new that you learned about yourself in those first few years of raising your kids while you were in Australia?
Yeah. Balance, balance of self-care and childcare was very difficult for me to find where the line is, because I know I'm over responsible. I'm very aware of that. And I'm also aware that I really valued my own journey. So finding a place that could feed both of them. And don't forget, I'm also growing in the sense that shedding a lot of things that I had picked up from the environment I grew in. Not that there was anything wrong with it, but in order to go to a higher place, you need to let go of a lot of things. So it's like a sifting mechanism that you bring everything that you know and you believe is right. And then you sift through it and you say, okay, I keep this one. I let go of this one, or I bring this new thing that is missing here. And that was an opportunity, because when you leave your safe and familiar environment, you sort of have to do that in either consciously or not consciously, subconsciously. But I did it very consciously. I knew I had brought a lot of things that I need to shed, and I could see it, and I could see it. Oh, a lot of shoulds and shouldn't, must and mustn't, bad and good. I had to let go of a lot of that and liberate myself from that in order to go to a more satisfying place. And I think I realized, and there was a lot of positive thing about the culture that I kept and intentionally kept, but there were also things that I realized that it's not serving me as I'm growing in my own self. So a lot of that happened through motherhood, because I could see, because that's such a beautiful mirror in front of you. The
Mm,
way I talked to my kids, the way I wanted them to be,
mm,
I put a lot of pressure on them to be a certain way. And then when I did
mm.
it, it was like, whoa, this is really, this is not satisfying to my soul.
Yeah, yeah. So you were really attuned to what feels right and attuned to you, and you became aware that there was conditioning that you received that wasn't
Yeah.
even yours,
Yes.
and that you had to consciously undo that conditioning.
I'm not sure if
Uh,
I was a good student and tuned student, or my children were very good teachers. They still are.
Probably both.
They were
Probably
just,
both.
they're amazing teachers.
Yeah.
Amazing teachers, both of them.
Yeah. So it's a period of you undoing your children being mirrors for you, you realizing all this conditioning that you got that isn't serving you and serving your relationship with your children, and you're consciously undoing this, and you're challenging old points of view. And I imagine in doing that, now it's loosening the shoulds and shouldn'ts you had also about marriage and relationship and the idea of divorce. And you mentioned that there was a series of events that led up to the decision to end the relationship. And I'm curious to hear about that, because it's a huge decision and it's an incredibly courageous decision that you made. So, what were those events that led to that decision?
So we were planning to leave Australia and come to North America. And in that transition, and whenever we're in transition, that's why they say when you travel with someone, you get to know them. When in that transition, certain things were happening. They showed me very vividly that this relationship is not sustainable. Nothing bad, nothing, good or bad. But, I saw it with my own eyes, and I was thinking that I'm starting a new life in a new country. And and I am not seeing any potential for its continuity. So I decided that time was the best time to cut the cord with the relationship and call off the marriage. And of course, it became very difficult in a way that um, my then life partner, was already completely. His plan was to move to North America. He had family in Canada. He had established sort of place to go to. And then I realized, even though, I had the main custody of the children, that I don't have the right. I could have stayed in Australia. I had every legal authority not to go to another country. But I realized that that would really make life for the father of my children difficult, and I did not want my children not to be with their father. I don't think anybody has that authority. I mean, unless their life is in danger. And so I decided, despite almost everyone I knew, including my family's advice, to move on my own to Canada, where he was settled, the father of my children was settled, and where my children and I moved to. Yeah.
Can you paint a picture for what you were going through personally, emotionally during this period of time when you were in Toronto? That first
Overwhelmed,
move. Yeah.
overwhelmed. I arrived in December. The snow was up to my knees. I knew no one, and I mean no one. And I went out and I looked at the street. Somebody had told me go north. Yonge Street is one of the longest streets in Toronto. Somebody said, just go north and you will find this place that I was looking for. And I looked and I thought, "Oh, where is north?" And and it was so cold, symbolically and literally, that I remember sitting on the street and just thinking, what am I going to do? And
Mm.
a passerby came to me and said, "Ma'am, you can't sit in this weather for a long time. You're going to freeze." And my answer was, "I'm already frozen."
Uh,
but but it was extremely difficult.
mm.
As far as the outer world, the physical world is concerned, that was the most difficult part of my life and period of my life, beside the time that I lost my father, which we never talked about,
We
interestingly enough.
didn't. Wow, we didn't get to that. Okay, maybe we'll have time to touch on that. And on this thread of moving to Toronto, what was hard about it? Was it the grieving of ending a relationship? Was it the grieving of leaving a country again and starting fresh? Was it you mentioned the challenge that was before you. What am I going to do? Because you had chosen to raise two children on your own. For some context, you were responsible for making your own income. You weren't relying on any uh, outside sources of income. Your ex husband's income. What was particularly the challenge for you, or was it kind of equally all of these things?
It was really a matter of survival. The question was only survival at that time. I was not even thinking about anything about inner world, and was fascinating
Mm,
for me, actually, because rarely I had a part of my life that included only survival. That was only survival. Where do I live? How do I work? How do I take my children to school? How do I pick
mm,
them up? And because two people's lives depended on me, you don't
mm.
have a lot of time to sort of do anything else. And I think the mammoth job in front of me, and I'm 33, 32 or 33, something like that. So I am young. I am in a country that is unfamiliar to me. I don't know anyone. The weather is extreme, and two children are, standing in front of me. It was very difficult, and I had to really put myself together in order to make this work, because I had made a decision and now I had to pay the price, so to speak. And so, yes, it was very, very survivalistic kind of period of my life.
And how long did that last?
Couple of years, and I very quickly, became familiar with the world in Toronto. I got a job almost immediately, which was unusual because it was a very difficult time economically in Canada. And I remember the person who interviewed me, I never forget. God bless her. Her name was Susan Sussman, a New Yorker living in Toronto. And when they interviewed me, they said they couldn't ask if you have any children because it was illegal. And she said, so you can do all the hours and you can do everything. And she was there with the board members interviewing me. And I said, no, I have two children and I have to leave by this time. And I said the time, I don't know, 2:30 or 3 o'clock. And they all said, but our working hours is longer. I said, but allow me to tell you, you cannot find anyone in this city that will be more responsible and do a better job than what I will do. I promise you that, but I have to go. And they told me, okay, we'll let you know in 2 weeks. We're interviewing other people. When I got home, my phone was ringing and Susan was on the phone and she said, when can you start? And I said, but thought you said 2 weeks from now. She said, no one has been so honest with us.
Mm,
And we just decided, both the board members and us and me, we decided to give the job to you.
mm.
So,
Conviction, conviction.
yes,
What was this role, by the way?
I was responsible for a research project in City of York, which is part of Toronto. And this was social planning council. So we were doing research on how the city is doing, and I was supposed to do the research and compile everything together and present it to the city council.
Okay. And just for some context for our listeners, so when you were during your time in Australia, um, your husband at that time was a management consultant, and you got exposure to the corporate world through his work. He brought you on as one of the coaches to teach soft skills to some of the leaders in some of these companies, and you were able to leverage that and use it to get a job and um, eventually create a whole career around coaching, or a vocation, I should say. So during this time, Mitra, where you're in survival mode, these 2 years from the time that you moved to Toronto, what did that help you remember?
Not sure if it's remembering or learning the difficulties of this physical world, because it's easy to be spiritual if you ignore the physical world. But if you remember the physical world, the material world, and its challenges, and then you go to the energetic world and look at it, then that becomes a different experience. So there's a way of just ignoring it or rejecting it. And then there's a way of including in and integrating it with your journey. And I think that was a little bit of a harsh landing into the material world. Don't forget, before this, I have experienced a lot of things: death, separation, immigration, like revolution. They were fine, but nothing comes home closer than people who you have brought to this world and you're
Mm,
responsible for. It's a
yeah.
very tangible way of experiencing the material world, because everything else you can just do it gradually. But you can't take one day, or I should say, I could not take one day without attending to them and being involved with them and feeding them and taking them to school and bathing them. You just couldn't do that. It's not like, okay, wait, I want to contemplate a little bit, then
Hmm.
I'll be back.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
Yeah. And for some context, when you moved to Toronto, they're about 9 and 6 years old.
yes,
So still pretty young.
very young.
So what was the tipping point for you, Mitro? What helped you transcend survivor mode?
I'm not sure if I have fully transcended survival mode, but I realized I can do that. Somewhere I got the message that I can handle it. And every time I go there, and sometimes I do go there, I remind myself, it's just like, you can handle it. Because I say to other people, and I think I've lived it, when I say this is hard, I'm overwhelmed, I put a period there. as if like, that's it. But now I know it's a comma. It is hard. I'm overwhelmed. This is so challenging, comma. I can handle it.
Hmm. What I'm hearing is you were very aware that even though it was difficult, that you were reflecting on what you were able to navigate and what you were able to accomplish during this time. And you realized despite it being challenging, you were able to make progress. That your fears that you had, the fears of not being able to provide for your children, they were slowly dissipating as you were able to demonstrate your own capabilities to yourself. And
Yes.
that helped
It
build
became,
confidence. It was a gradual building
yes,
of self confidence and
yes.
your ability to take care of yourself and your kids.
Yes, it became evident to me, and it's becoming, I shouldn't say that even, it's becoming more evident to me that anything outwardly I can handle. It's the inwardly world that I need to really attend to and not let go of. Why? Because it becomes a way of entertaining your awareness and all of your consciousness and attention. It steals it. By the time you do all of these things, it's like 10:30 at night. You might as well go to sleep. There's not much for room for contemplation. But when you say yes, this is I know all of these things, and I sometimes say it. I have to do this. I have to do this. This is difficult. This is overwhelming. I have no, and then I say, okay, I do know that, comma, I can handle it. Yeah.
Mm,
I was
yeah.
built for this.
Yeah, and there was a period of time in that survival period where you were able to get a short break from responsibilities of a mother. Your children were visiting their father, and you used this time to go into a deeply introspective place. You went into your own private silent retreat. Is that right? Where
Yes.
you were not speaking, you were not doing anything. How did that impact this period of your life? Because there are a few moments that you could introspect, and then all of a sudden you had a period of, it sounds like several weeks, maybe a couple months, where you could, and I imagine there were revelations and many blessings that came from that.
Yes. So I had a lot of breaks because they would go and visit their father. But this, when the break was like continuous, and sometimes it was. I remember the first time that happened. It was almost over a month, and that was amazing because that's when I went to a silent retreat. I don't. I mean, there was no retreat. I went to a silent monastery and stayed in silence for a while. This was the second or third time I had done that, and what it did was that it's almost like recharging. It
Mm,
recharged me, and I remembered a lot of things. I remembered
mm,
um, being many things, and it helped me. I came back far more equipped for the survival life that I was living in those
mm.
days.
Yeah, yeah, it sounds like it was an integration time that you
Yes,
had. Yeah,
yes,
yeah. And you could have, by the way, during that time, you could have chosen not to prioritize your spiritual life. You could have just continued working. A lot of people, myself for a period of my life included, even when things settle down and we don't have a reason to be busy, we're so used to and so addicted to being busy that we busy ourselves. We fill the spaces that we get by busying ourselves. And you consciously chose to use the space that you got to go inward and to integrate.
it's a
And
craving.
yeah,
It's a craving I think many of us have. The question is, which craving do I satisfy? The
yeah,
craving for more and more of this world, or the craving of deliciousness of remembering in my inner world? Yeah.
yeah. There's so many chapters to your life, and there's so much we can unravel here. Let's fast forward to meeting Henry, your life partner, and your husband. I don't know a lot about your relationship with Henry. I'm curious to learn more, but what I have perceived is that it's a relationship that is characterized by balance, harmony, mutual respect, interdependence in the healthiest sense of that word, deep compassion for one another. And you met Henry about what was it, like, 20 years ago now?
Over
You
20
met
years ago, yeah.
over 20 years ago. You met in a bookstore. It sounds like things moved relatively quickly in terms of recognizing that this is someone that I'm compatible with. What attracted you most about Henry? And what do you think has made you so compatible?
So
Or you
first of all, the words that you use, thank you, they were very kind words, but those are the intentions of the relationship, not the condition of the relationship, because that will disappoint a lot of people who are listening to this. Oh, so there's a relationship out there that is built on mutual respect and compassion and this and that. Those are the intentions. And that's very precious to both of us. When I concluded that this is a worthy relationship to really explore further was when I realized the depth of Henry's journey, that I realized this is a being that wants to know and wants to grow. And that was the attractive part of his journey for me, because that I realized that was the part that commonality that was missing in many relationships that I had, and that's the one that was most attractive. It's not like we were exactly where was we were perfect for each other. We were perfect for each other's growth, not for each other. There's a difference, because when we say somebody's perfect for me, that means as they are, they're just like whoops, click in and it would be perfect. It didn't click in, but it did show me, and I assume showed him, that there is a lot of room for growth and oneness and unity. Remember, I said the first thing that I felt in this world was lack of unity and separation, that I feel that's the first thing we forget. That's where all the problems start. And I really looked at Henry and his journey and his talks, and he's a very straightforward person. What you see is what you get. That this is a person that I can experience unity with
Mhm.
and build that back and remember that back.
And grow with. It sounds like you were aware there were imperfections, but knowing that he was someone who prioritizes growth, someone who is transparent and direct,
Yes.
and probably other qualities that I'm not naming, you recognize that this is something that can evolve into unity, and he is willing and you are willing. So let's open that up a little bit more. The willingness is key. The willingness for both people to grow, acknowledging that the imperfections are there. I imagine other qualities and other values that are key, have been key in allowing you both to navigate your challenges together and to continue to grow and to continue to strengthen your relationship and experience higher and higher levels of unity. So, what are some of those other qualities?
First one that comes to me when you ask this question is he's prepared to go through pain in order to understand things and remember things.
Mm,
Most people want to just get rid of it, and he wants to unfold it. And that is very precious to me, because I sometimes want to just let it go. I'm just tired. It's just like let's just pretend it's not there. But he won't.
mm,
And he wants to unfold it, and he wants to talk about it, and he wants to understand it, and he wants to work on it. And that takes a lot for a person to sort of get there. This
mm,
is a person who's been at it. He's the child of two Holocaust survivors, and is carrying both genetically and historically a lot of pain.
mm,
And yet he's not afraid of further pain, of seeing things the way they are. And that to me is extremely refreshing,
mm.
very refreshing.
Yeah, so it sounds like he's challenged you to go places that
Yes,
maybe in previous relationships you would just avoid.
yes, yes.
And
And
it
that's,
sound
I think, very precious.
what is it about how he does that? Because how someone does that is important too. Someone can do that abrasively, right? And they can want to be very direct and ungraceful in that process. There's a way to go about it. So what is his way of addressing these challenges and looking at them directly that you guys have?
With me, gently.
Yeah.
With me, he brings it up gently, he suggests it, he pushes it, but it's so gentle
Mm,
that I can actually work through it. And I think that understanding, that willingness, plus the depth, his depth of, and by depth, I mean, everybody has a depth. These are words that we use, but the depth to which he's prepared to travel inside of himself and the willingness to pay the price for that and
mm,
the gentleness he approaches this with me is I haven't experienced that, so I don't know if it exists. I'm sure it does, but I hadn't experienced that. And I think
mm,
these are the reasons that we went beyond um, just having a relationship, a romantic relationship. It's a relationship that is meaningful in the sense that it forms, deeply informs and keeps informing our lives. And I know definitely my journey, I mean, speaking about myself, definitely my journey has been deeply informed by that. Remember that unity with a person, just think about that, that is not from my gender, that is not from my culture, that is not from my country, that is not from my religion, that is not, I mean, there's just so many things that are different about us, yet this unity is so strong.
mm. That's beautiful. That's beautiful. Gentleness has been key for you in allowing that flowering to happen in your relationship. And when I think of gentleness, I also think of spaciousness, patience,
Yes. Yes.
spaciousness and patience. Sometimes you don't get a resolution right away. Sometimes it needs days, maybe even weeks, you know.
Yes. Or
But
years.
being but being willing, or even years, but being willing to hold that space and to be patient and to remain also hopeful that the resolution is there, that the lesson, the blessings, the harmonies on the other side of that.
And I really want to emphasize because I always am concerned that I may be giving a picture of a perfect relationship. I want to tell whoever that is listening, I've been privy to people's talks about their relationships for over 4 decades on 4 continents. Such thing doesn't exist. But this is a relationship that you decide when you get into it that is worthwhile working through. You pick a person and you work through them. Nothing comes ready. It's not packaged. It's not perfect. And when people say, I want to find my perfect match, my back goes, and I think, oh God, perfect. That word doesn't exist. But a perfect match for my growing experience, yes, that exists. So I'm very worried to, to draw a picture that sounds like it's a perfect relationship. It's a relationship that is ongoingly growing and we are willing to do it no matter what happens. And we've gone through very, very challenging experiences together. And either I was experiencing it or he was, or we were together experiencing it. Health issues, family issues, political events. It's been very challenging but
Yeah.
extremely rewarding.
And I remember, Mitra, in the last year, you had mentioned to me that you were discovering a new love with Henry, as if you guys were going through your honeymoon phase all over again. And I'm curious to know what happened during that time. What was the shift that occurred that created this new opening in your relationship with him?
So for me, it was like first you fall in love, mainly with things you see. And then you love them if you stay in a relationship because you've been together. And then for me, what happened was that I felt like I was falling in love, not because he's handsome or even though he is, or he's, brilliant, even though I think he is, but it was because I knew him. It's a knowing falling in love, which is a very different falling in love. It is a sense of knowing someone because I know you, and I know you with all of your
Hmm.
warts, not just know you, oh, he's a wonderful man. No, I know you when you're down. I know you when you're angry. I know you when you are weak. I know you when you're strong. And even with all of that, I'm now falling in love with the inner knowing that I have of you, not just because whatever it is that I'm impressed by it, generalities that I see. So that's what happened for me because we really got to a deep place together. And I thought, like, I am falling in love through knowing, not through seeing and liking what I see.
Mm. Yeah, yeah. It's a deeper love, an unconditional love,
Yes.
and I feel a more solid love, an unperturbable love.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. It excludes the condition of the conditions of outside. I think for me, I am far from fully experiencing unconditional love, but this is as close as it gets. One with your children, and the other one with the relationship that you have invested in, and you have really worked on. So yeah,
Yeah. Okay. So, in the interest of time now, we'll bring this to a close. First, I want to thank you. Thank you so much for being, willing to share your personal journey with us. I know it's not something you're used to doing. You're not used to going into depth about your past and your journey, and I'm really grateful that you did that for us here. There's so much wisdom and light that has come from this conversation, and understanding of what has shaped you,
yeah.
and your wisdom. So thank you.
Thank you for your curiosity. I always think, what is it to talk about? People get bored, but somehow you decided that it's not so. So thank you for your curiosity. And I want to say, and I know you don't know this, but Ben, you also are part of my journey, and a great part of journey and a delicious part of my journey. We met many years ago, and somehow I look at you and I knew, I think then, that this is the person that I wanted to get to know much, much deeper. And it naturally and organically happened. I never did anything about it, but somehow we came together. So I just wanted to say that.
Thank you, Mitra, and the same for me. I feel a deep connection with you, and as you know, you've had a very profound impact on my life, and I'm so grateful for that. With that, I guess we'll bring this episode to a close. And to our listeners, thank you for staying with us this whole time. Until next time, Mitra. Thank you so much for tuning in today. For a list of the links and other resources referenced in this episode, check out the podcast description.
If you're benefiting from our podcast, we'd love if you could help us reach more people by subscribing. Your support means the world to us. From our hearts to yours, we thank you.